During my recent makeover of my home office, I discovered I needed a new bookshelf that would fit a lot of books in a narrow area. So I decided to build a 4-sided, 8-foot tall bookshelf with drawer storage that only takes a 15 by 15 inch footprint. And by the way, it spins. Let's go see how I did it.
This video is sponsored by DAP Products.
I picked up a sheet of 3/4 inch birch plywood from my local Home Depot. And while I was there, I had them rip it into rough widths just to save me some time and make it easier to transport. But now I'm going to use a combination of my table saw and a circular saw to break them down into the specific components that I need.
Don't worry about writing down every measurement because I created a comprehensive set of building plans for this project, so you can make one yourself. Links to all the products that I used as well as the building plans can be found in the description box.
I designed the drawer faces on the lower base of the bookshelf to be the same width as the vertical supports for the shelves themselves, which is 4.5 inches. So I have those vertical boards and all I have to do is cut off 13 3/8 from 2 of the board's ends.
A table saw with an accurate fence is a quick and easy way to make repeated cuts. You could also break down your plywood components using a circular saw and a scrap piece of wood for an edge guide. For the wider crosscuts on some of the longer panels, I found them easiest to make using my Craig AccuCut, which is a simple jig that attaches to your circular saw, basically turning it into a track saw. Once the plywood panels were more of a manageable size, I went back over to my table saw so I could make repeated cuts a little bit more accurately. Once all my components were cut down to size, I needed to figure out how I was going to join them together.
I haven't used pocket holes in quite a while, but they are a very easy, quick, strong joint. They're not great for every application, but they're really good for putting together plywood boxes like I'm doing today. To drill my pocket holes, I am using this guy. I believe it's the 720 Pro by Craig Jig. It self-adjusts the depth and thickness of the material you're using, so it goes really fast.
While I had the pocket jig out, I went ahead and drilled all the holes that I was going to need for the joinery, including for the base box, which holds the drawers, as well as the underside of the shelves themselves.
I've got all my plywood components cut down to size, and now I need to address these raw edges. In order to make these panels look like solid wood, I'm going to apply some hardwood edge banding. There's lots of different ways to do it. For me, the quickest, cheapest, easiest way is to use the iron-on kind. I've got about 110 feet of plywood edge to cover up, so I better get comfortable because I'm gonna be here for a while.
In my experience, the easiest way to cut plywood edge banding is a sharp utility knife.
Edge banding is intentionally a little oversized, so it's a little bit wider than standard 3/4 inch plywood. To trim off that little bit of excess, I am using this. It's an edge band trimmer. This one happens to be double-sided, so I can trim both sides at the same time.
Liking what you see? Tag that like button down below. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe as well.
Most of the bookshelf I will assemble after it's already finished, but the base will be best to put together right now while it's just raw plywood.
To make sure that my joint stayed strong, I used Weldwood Professional Wood Glue by DAP. It's my go-to wood glue because not only is it strong, but it dries pretty quickly and the squeeze out is a lot easier to clean up than some other glues. Also, the new formulation tends to dry more brown than yellow. So just in case I don't clean up all my squeeze out perfectly, the seams are a lot less noticeable than they would be with a bright yellow glue. Once the top, bottom, back, and sides of the base box were assembled, I could then measure the width of the box opening, which helps me determine the dimensions for the drawers themselves. I ripped down some leftover plywood into 2.5 inch strips and then used my table saw to cut a 1/4 inch groove which will hold the bottom of the drawer. If you don't have a table saw, you could use a router to cut this groove as well.
By far the hardest part of making drawers is making the drawer boxes, and specifically getting the width right. The length can vary a little bit, but the width has to be dead on, otherwise the drawer won't function properly. I'll show you the way that I like to measure. So first of all, I have my box, make sure it's as square as possible. I then take both drawer slides, so the left and the right, stack them together. And then I also take the two side rails of my drawer box, so the ones that will run from the front to the back. I place those two pieces together snugly up against my drawer slides. And then I just measure the space that's left over. Looks like about 11.5 inches on this one.
I cut the drawer box fronts to length and then began assembly. I attached the sides of the drawer box to the back using weldwood wood glue, as well as 1¼ wood screws, and then slid in a panel of 3/16 inch thick hardboard for my bottom. The panel sits right into the groove that we cut, and once I add the drawer box front, the panel is secured but still allows for expansion and contraction.
It's time to get all the bookshelf pieces stained. I've decided to use the same gel stain that I used on my desktop in the office. I've decided it's going to be a lot easier to stain and finish all the pieces before I assemble them. Typically, I like to finish at the end of a project, but there's going to be so many angles and nooks and crannies on this bad boy that it will definitely be easier to get everything stained and finished with clear before I start nailing and screwing it together.
All my bookshelf components received 1 coat of aged oak gel stain, followed by 3 coats of clear lacquer. Once everything was fully dried, I could begin to install my drawer boxes into the base box. I used 12-inch full extension side-mounted drawer slides. They may not be the prettiest option, but they're easy to install and very strong. With both drawer boxes installed, I turned my attention to the drawer faces. Adding drawer faces, especially inset drawer faces like these ones, can be a little bit tricky. There's a few tricks, like using double-sided tape, but with the specific hardware that I was planning on using, I could get away with temporarily securing the drawer faces to the drawer box using a screw because the hole would later be covered. Once the drawer faces were aligned where they should be, I carefully pulled the drawer boxes out, clamped the drawer faces in place, and then made my final connection by driving 1¼ inch screws from the inside of the drawer box. I then used a laser level to find the dead center of each drawer face. The drawer pulls that I wanted to use sit flush, so they require a mortise or hole to be drilled into the drawer face. I used an 1 3/8" Forstner bit to bore a flat bottom hole in the center of each drawer face. I then could add the pulls by using the provided screws driven from the inside of the drawer box.
So now I've flipped over my base cabinet and it is time to add the metal feet that I purchased. Found these bad boys on Amazon. I think they're 4 inches tall, but they should give me a nice sturdy base to hold everything up. I brought all my bookshelf pieces inside and I'm going to assemble them. Because they're pre-finished, I was worried about scratching them out in my shop. I'm going to start by laying out one of my vertical supports and start attaching shelves, working my way up.
I found the easiest method to get my shelves in place was to first mark the location of each shelf on the vertical shelf support using a pencil, and then align the shelves onto the vertical support. With the shelf where I wanted, I could then drive a couple 18-gauge brad nails to give me some temporary support. I then strengthened the connection by driving an 1¼ inch screw through the pocket hole on the underside of the shelf. Once I attached my shelves to the first vertical support, I flipped the assembly over on its side and added a second. With each vertical support, it got easier and easier to align my shelves. Next, I added my 15-inch square top panel to the top edge of the vertical supports by pre-drilling and driving 2.5-inch screws.
Before I attach the bottom panel to the bookshelf, I'm going to add my Lazy Susan hardware. I picked this one up. It is a 12-inch turntable. It's rated for 1,000 pounds, so it should be able to take the bookshelf even when it's fully loaded with books.
Different turntable kits have different types of mounting instructions, but I wanted to make sure that mine was very well secured, especially to the base of the bookshelf. This meant drilling a 1/2-inch diameter hole in the bottom of my shelving unit so I could drop in 1/4-inch diameter hex bolts through the Lazy Susan and into the base box. The manufacturer recommended using sheet metal screws, so admittedly this technique may have been a little bit of overkill. I pre-drilled 1/4-inch holes in the top panel of the base box. Then we could carefully lower the shelving assembly on top of the base, aligning the hex bolts through the holes. I secured the connection by adding washers and tightening hex nuts on the underside of the top panel.
The bookshelf is pretty much done. The only thing I need to do before I load it with books is to fill a few of those little pinholes on the outside. Usually my go-to wood filler is Plastic Wood X by DAP. I love it not only because it dries really quickly and is easy to sand, but it has this cool time indicator technology, meaning it starts out pink when the filler is wet, and when it turns tan, you know it's dry and ready to sand. Although Plastic Wood X is stainable, I have kind of a unique situation with this project since I had to apply my finish before assembling. So in unique situations like this, when I need to fill holes in a finished surface, I like to use these guys. They are plastic wood blend sticks, also made by DAP. They come in a ton of different colors and are super easy to apply. You simply rub the blend stick back and forth over your hole and it magically fills in. After the hole is filled with product, you simply buff off the excess and you're done.
Ready to see the final result? The amount of books you can store on this bookshelf will vary depending on, well, the size of the books and the number of shelves that you install. I haven't measured the cubic inches, but we had enough space to replace 2 smaller bookshelves that we previously had in our office. Just a reminder to check the description box so you can score your own set of building plans. The overall height of the bookshelf portion of this build can be adjusted to meet your needs. If you want to see the full office makeover, including the waterfall desk that I made, you'll want to click the link to watch this video. And if you like other types of DIY content, check out this video as well. As always, thanks for watching, guys.